Good evening. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to our special election night broadcast. I'm Alia Adam. After a hard-fought campaign filled with promises on healthcare, housing, and education, New Brunswickers have made their voices heard loud and clear at the ballot box, and tonight history is being made. You're watching Decision New Brunswick 2024. Thank you for joining us. The province will soon be led by its first ever female premier as the Liberals secure a majority government under Susan Holt. Let's take a look now at how the electoral map has changed. The Liberals came into this election with 16 seats. They now have 31. That's a gain of 15 seats. The PC Party has been reduced to 16 seats, down from 25, and the Green Party now sits at 2 seats, down from 3. With no further ado, let's head over to the Liberal headquarters where Heidi Pic is standing by. Heidi, Susan Holt really set the tone with 100 promises during her campaign, but it clearly resonated with voters.
Indeed, and I'm not sure even Liberal Party supporters thought it would happen this quickly with the results coming in and this decisively as well, having that much of a gain for the Liberal Party under Susan Holt. And as you mentioned, this is historic. First woman to be elected as Premier in the province of New Brunswick, and there's a lot on her plate now with those 100 promises. The next job, once everything is made official, will be to make good on those promises. That campaign platform costed out at about $1.3 billion so far, and Holt insists she can make it happen with the surpluses that have been posted in New Brunswick under the previous government. So that will be her task, really, to move forward with taking on some of the challenges that New Brunswickers are facing in terms of the healthcare system that's struggling, in terms of lack of affordable housing, and with the cost of living. And that's really what she has to do. She also, of course, was one of those who was against the changes that had been made to Policy 713 on gender identity in school, so she will have to follow through with what she has committed to in that regard as well. So a lot on the plate for Susan Holt. Once all the celebrations here are done and a new day begins, that's when the work starts for the Liberal Party of New Brunswick and the new government. Alia.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Heidi. That's our Heidi Pic at the Liberal headquarters tonight. Now, let's take a look at the other side of the spectrum, the PC Party, where it's a different kind of mood there, and that's where we find our Silas Brown. Now, Silas, Blaine Higgs losing his own seat, definitely not the night he was looking for. What's the mood like there right now?
Well, it's starting to get pretty empty in here, Alia, as people file out. And as you mentioned, Higgs lost his seat, and as he said to me, he's no longer in politics. He no longer has a seat, although he is not officially resigning his position at the head of the party. He says that there will be a transition now and that the party will work through next steps and that there will be an announcement on his future in the coming weeks. Now, the real attention will begin to turn to who takes over, who are the potential leadership hopefuls. Do some of the disgruntled ministers from the so-called progressive wing of the party begin to come back? Do any of them take a stab at leadership? Or are there any among the currently elected caucus who feel that they would like to take a shot at leading the party? Now, party officials say that they are hopeful that this will be a short trip to the opposition benches, but a trip to the opposition benches it will be fairly decisively. And what multiple officials have told me is that they feel that they were just unable to connect with voters in terms of their message and their record, and really running on the successes that they had over their 6 years in government. And they really see that as the failure of the overall campaign. Alia?
All right, thank you so much for that, Silas. That's our Silas Brown in Quispamsi, Blaine Higgs' home riding, which he lost his seat in. Now we're going to head over to the Green Party headquarters. That's where we find our Suzanne Lapointe. And Suzanne, a bit of a setback here for the Greens. They lost a seat, but David Coon did manage to keep his, which was definitely not a shoo-in at the beginning of the night.
Yes, there's definitely a little bit of disappointment in the room as they've lost one of their 3 MLAs. So Kevin Arsenault in Kent North has lost to former federal Liberal MP Pat Finnegan. I spoke to campaign leader Joanne Roberts. She speculates that part of this is down to his limited ability to campaign. So remember that Kevin Arsenault had an emergency appendectomy in late September, not long after the writ dropped. Coon said he was very disappointed to lose Kevin, but he still wants to continue in pressuring the Liberal government to fix health care. That's the big thing he kept coming back to, and he did congratulate Susan Holt on becoming the first female premier in New Brunswick. Alia?
All right, thank you so much, Suzanne. That's our Suzanne Lapointe in Fredericton at the Green Party headquarters. Now, to help break down all of these results tonight, we're pleased to welcome political science professor Laurie Turnbull from Dalhousie University. Laurie, thank you so much for being here with us. Wow, those results came in fast and furious. New Brunswickers were ready for a change.
Oh yeah, for sure. This was decisive. This was a fast night, not at all like what we saw in British Columbia just a couple of nights ago, where they're still going to have to count part of that. Like, this was just very decisive. This was a huge win for the Liberals, and I don't think totally an expected one. Like, not that they were doing badly, but I think that, again, like just the clarity of the win, how many seats they gained at the Progressive Conservatives' expense, the fact that the Premier lost his own seat, the Green Party leader lost his seat as well. This is a pretty significant win for the Liberals and a clear mandate for Susan Holt, and her first time. You know, this is her first election that she's running as a leader of a party, and so I think a huge win for her.
And of course, we're mentioning that she's the first female premier designate, but that's not really something that she didn't use that card throughout the campaign. She was really heavily focused on the issues that New Brunswickers seem to care about the most, and that's healthcare and affordability.
100%. I think she was very clear about that, about the fact that New Brunswickers really needed to see action on those policies, and they wanted to, as she said earlier tonight, they wanted to see more hopeful messaging from a leader. But I think she did take some effort to define herself as not Blaine Higgs. I think she was very pointed about that, actually. I think she was picking up on a lot of the challenges that he's had in his leadership for a number of years now, but I think definitely which came to a point around Policy 713. And so I think she was, she really kind of made a point of saying that she would be a different kind of leader, a different kind of premier. And I think that worked out for her.
Yeah, translated to the votes. Now let's take a look at some of those game-changing races. Liberal candidate Doucette won the riding of Moncton East. Now, this is where the previous PC candidate Daniel Alain was removed from the party due to his objection to Policy 713 changes. And of course, Laurie, we saw that in multiple ridings. And if we take a look at St. John Harbour, another interesting riding, David Hickey nearly doubled the votes here, defeating PC candidate Adam Smith. And in Moncton South, Claire Johnson beats the incumbent PC Greg Turner. So we're seeing a lot of these Liberals taking over in these particular ridings that we were watching throughout the night. And Fredericton North, that's another riding we were looking for. It's a tough loss because it was the former cabinet minister Jill Green's riding. So she lost to Luke Randall. And that was by like 51% of the votes. And another riding that we were watching tonight was the Miramichi Bay Negwak riding. Sam Johnson took the riding from PC Régent Savoie after the former Liberal incumbent Jill Harris went to run federally. Laurie, what are your thoughts on all these interesting ridings?
Yeah. So I think a few things happened with this election. One was that in 2023, they had a major redrawing of the electoral map. And so I think that made it hard to know what was going to happen, because there were just so many places where, even if you're looking back at the last election, the election before that, the fact that the boundaries were drawn so differently meant that you couldn't necessarily really guess with any precision how the votes would translate this time into seats. And so I think we're seeing some of that uncertainty come through. And also, because a number of cabinet ministers decided they weren't going to reoffer because of their differences with Blaine Higgs, that left a lot of seats open. And so again, not sure, not when there's an incumbent gone, and incumbency is such a strong factor in determining the outcome of an election. When you had so many walk away, it made the whole thing just much more open to question.
Absolutely. And of course, those redrawings, one of them in Susan Holt's own riding and David Coon's riding, we weren't sure where it was going at the beginning of the night, but those results certainly came fast. Thank you so much for your insight on that. We're going to head over to break to take quite a little breather, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Decision New Brunswick 2024. Now, New Brunswick has elected a Liberal majority government. It's been an exhilarating victory for Susan Holt's Liberal Party, winning 31 seats in total. Not a great night for Blaine Higgs, who not only lost his leadership, but also his home riding. Now, David Coon's Green lost one of the 3 seats it occupied before. So we want to bring in our chief political correspondent, David Aken, to break down some of these results. David, what does this election mean for the 3 major party leaders?
Well, I want to pick up on something Lori mentioned just before the break, and that is that the riding boundaries, particularly in Fredericton and St. John, Moncton, all substantially different, and that was a real wild card going into tonight's race. Let's just look at the 3 leaders, because we have 2 leaders I thought might lose and one who I thought shouldn't lose, and in fact, the 2 leaders I thought might lose won quite handily. So in Fredericton South Silverwood, I mentioned this earlier in the evening, Alia, that Susan Holt picked a riding where 4 years ago, the people in what is now Fredericton South Silverwood, just 14% of them voted Liberal. 40% voted Conservative, 38% voted Green. So Susan Holt picked a riding where she looked around and went, well, 4 years ago, most of these people voted for somebody else. And tonight, look what she did. She turned that right around, and Fredericton South Silverwood, 51.6% of the vote, to the Conservatives, 26%, and the Greens, well back, 21%. I think as we look around the province, a lot of Greens probably said to themselves, I like David Coon, but I'm looking for change. And the way you achieve change in this particular riding and in many others is vote for the Liberals. So that's Fredericton Silverwood. Quispamsi. Wow, look at that. Aaron Kennedy wins. He's a Liberal, 46% of the vote. I looked it up. The Libs got 15% 4 years ago. And Higgs won that riding with 68% of the vote 4 years ago. And he dropped. He loses the seat. And there again, in Greater St. John generally, and Quispamsi, of course, is just north of St. John, is St. John voters, where Liberals were shut out 4 years ago, said today, no, it's time for some change. It's time to change the MLA in Quispamsi. And they did. So a real big turnaround there. So that's the leader who lost. And then David Coon in the riding of Fredericton-Lincoln, same thing. He picked up a new riding, a little bit of his old Fredericton South, but also the riding of Lincoln, which stretches down towards the airport. A little more conservative polls there. And again, if David Coon looked at the new riding he's the MLA for, Fredericton-Lincoln, 4 years ago, it would have elected a conservative. But they did the campaign right, and clearly people in that riding said change is going to come in the form of David Coon, and so David Coon wins 44% of the vote. But those are just some ways. Again, this happens every 10 years after a census, and in fact, this is one of the neat things about this census. The census was done a few years ago, and already we've seen tens of thousands of new people move to New Brunswick, mostly down in the southeast around Moncton, Shediac. The population's just exploding, and I would suspect that it's time probably to redo the ridings in that part of the province. Again, big story tonight was these new riding boundaries. Liberals did a great job, get out the vote, etc., to adjust for them, and it paid off with a big majority.
Absolutely, and the province certainly looking a lot more different than it was 4 years ago. Thank you so much for breaking that down for us, David. That's our David Aken following those results from Ottawa for us tonight. Now, for more about the leaders, our Silas Brown caught up with the PC leader Blaine Higgs earlier this evening after he lost power and his seat. Take a look.
Thank you, Alia. I'm here in Quispamsi with PC leader Blaine Higgs. I'm hoping you could tell me about how you're feeling right now as you're reflecting on the results from tonight.
Oh, it's obviously a big disappointment. I mean, there's no doubt about that. I've been putting endless hours into building a better province and in every sector, and the results show that. If you look back on the last 6 years, I mean, we've gone through a lot, and the province has been growing and financially sound, which it certainly wasn't. So, I had a whole list of things to get right at tomorrow, next day. I might have taken tomorrow off. Now I'll take a little more than that, I guess. But I was looking forward to getting right under the hood, and I didn't need any really roadmap because we already had one. So it's disappointing, and it'll take some adjustment. There's no doubt about it. I'm a person that really keeps busy working and always looking out for the next generation, not the next week. So it's going to take some adjustment.
Is there something that you look at from this campaign that you think, maybe might have helped sway things, or maybe would have made a difference if you had done things differently?
Well, I think that, you always go back to, could we have told our story better? Could we have basically let people know what it means to be now not a basket case, what it saved in interests of 90, 100 million a year, what's happening in our schools with young people and immigration, and why housing costs are high? Because we've got such a population growth, something we hadn't had for years and generations. So there's so many things that are confronting us with issues that are related to growth. In the healthcare, record, if you look back and looked over the last 6 years, 5 years, you'd see tremendous spending in these areas, tremendous spending, higher than any government by far. And you'd say, okay, so then now we focus on how do we manage healthcare better. So I guess it's disappointing that the story maybe wasn't told the way that people could understand it. And going through this campaign, the goal was how do we save taxpayers money? How do we get more money in the pockets of taxpayers? And how do we get rid of the carbon tax? So I'm hoping that the new Premier will really address that and support the federal government change in the sense of that issue. I know the other issues may be struggle, but I think people want to get relief at the pumps, which gives relief in the grocery stores.
You talk about maybe doing a better job telling your story. Obviously, it's tough as an incumbent premier, particularly when you're running on your record and people looking from 6 years ago to today, and maybe not feeling like they were better off despite progress that you believe that you've made and that the province has made. So, I mean, were you just behind the 8 ball in some ways in terms of being an incumbent and having to tell that story?
Oh, I think any incumbent government is behind the 8 ball in that sense, right? It's a reality. And of course, with many of the issues that we've had to deal with, like carbon tax, which is an affordability issue. It's like, do we put Band-Aids on this or do we get rid of the root cause? And so our focus was the root cause. And then how do we expand the growth in our province and the economic opportunities in our province? So it's not relying on taxpayer dollars, And so, but yeah, it's tough on incumbent government. It's it's hard to if there's problems, which there certainly seems to be unrest in the province with any incumbent. We're seeing that certainly. They're still trying to figure out who's going to be in BC, I think, at this stage. So we're seeing that, and that's maybe I'm a victim of that, but also we had some challenges in terms of, I think, how we get our message of it's all part of a bigger picture.
You mentioned during your speech that this would trigger some sort of transition in terms of the leadership of the party. Do you expect that this will lead to you resigning as leader of the party?
I mean, I think it's early to me to say that tonight, but I mean, I didn't win this riding. So, I mean, I think my future in politics is coming to an end. It's not easy, it's tough because I've dedicated 14 years to the political system, but there comes a point when everyone has to, find a new day, and I don't do well at idle time. So I think my wife is probably as concerned about that as anyone, because I'm pretty active, and she's will probably generate a lot of lists for me. But I'm probably one that'll find a lot of lists of my own.
Blaine Higgs, thank you very much for making the time.
Hey, Silas. Very welcome.
Back to you, Alia.
Thanks so much for that, Silas. That was an interesting chat between Silas and Blaine Higgs. Got a bit of an indication there on his future, where he's heading, his wife's opinion on his political future as well. What did you make of that interview?
I mean, what can he say? He lost his government, he lost his seat. I don't think that this is where he thought the night would end, even if things didn't go marvelously for them. I honestly don't think that Blaine Higgs thought that he would be on, in this particular circumstance and having this conversation. But honestly, like he was pretty matter of fact about it. And I think that that's how he's always been. He's always been just kind of a straight shooter about things. He says what he thinks. He says how he feels. And I think, I think he feels that the way he was going forward with the province was the right way. And you still hear him talking about some of the ideas that he had for policies, for getting rid of the carbon tax, those sorts of things, right? Like I think those things he really holds as his true preferences and how he thinks things should be run in the province. And so I'm sure he's not going to, I don't think he'll step away tonight or tomorrow, because I think now that the party, like that was the most interesting question in the, what are you going to do now? Are you going to stay as leader? Are you going to move on? What happens? And I think, when you have somebody like Blaine Higgs, whose grip on the party is so strong and complete, nobody has put their hand up to be the leader of that party. And so it's probably going to take a little while for enough oxygen to go through that room to figure out who is going to be in a position to lead it again.
Right, they're going to have a lot of internal questions of how to reform, how to get the momentum back going.
And if Pierre Poilievre is going to be a Conservative Prime Minister, if all the polls hold and that happens, the provinces who are identifying as progressive Conservative have to figure out how they're going to manage that relationship with a Conservative Prime Minister who is not necessarily carrying the same values that they do as progressive Conservatives. Yeah.
And let's talk a bit more about his campaign, because it was a bit of an interesting campaign. It was a 2-page campaign platform. His main promise was the cut to the HST. And otherwise, his main focus was sort of criticizing the Liberal government, right? And then you have all these internal issues that happened a few months ago with his party. Policy 713 didn't seem to be a huge campaign issue, but do you think that it actually played a role in the results tonight?
Oh yeah, I think so, 100%. And again, I agree with you that Policy 713 was not necessarily something that came up over and over again during the campaign as an issue in and of itself. But I think that's because it was raised a long time ago and people made their minds up about how Blaine Higgs handled that situation, both in terms of the content of how he changed the policy, but also in terms of his leadership and how he managed his relationships with people when they didn't agree with him. And I think at the time, that was very impactful in terms of people's impressions of Blaine Higgs. And I think opinions were formed around that time. Mm-hmm. And so even though it didn't come up a whole lot in the campaign, I think it did have a big impact. Yeah.
Yeah. Just with John Dornan that we saw, he became a star candidate for the Liberals on the other side. So definitely had some repercussions there. We're going to throw it over to the break, but we will be right back with more of your results. Stay with us. Welcome back to Decision New Brunswick. It's been a big night for the Liberals. They're taking the power back from the PCs after 6 years. Now, the people of New Brunswick have elected Susan Holt as their new provincial leader. Heidi Pic spoke to the new Premier-designate at the Liberals campaign in Fredericton. Take a listen.
Susan Holt, thank you so much for taking the time. How are you feeling after all of this?
Oh, I'm feeling incredible. I'm feeling really proud of our amazing team of candidates, of volunteers, of staff who have worked so hard for this for a long time, and to see New Brunswickers respond the way they did, to send such a clear message of support for our campaign that was focused on them. It was positive. It was about bringing people together. I am on cloud 9.
Why did your campaign decide to really put you front and center? I mean, it really was Team Holt, and I feel like there was a stark contrast there between what the progressive Conservatives were doing. Was that a conscious decision, or was it just something that happened organically?
I think it was a bit of both, right? One of the things that New Brunswickers were telling us that they were frustrated with was leadership. They wanted to see a certain tone set from the top, and they weren't feeling, they were looking for a government that was going to listen, care, respect them, no matter what language they speak, no matter who they love, no matter where they lived. And because leadership was what New Brunswickers were looking for, that's why Team Holt and me were emerged.
And you were very busy during the campaign as well.
Yes, we covered a ton of ground, campaigned hard every day, barring I think 2 days off that we took. And look, that's what I've been doing for the last 2.5 years, is getting out to be with New Brunswickers where they are in this province has so many amazing corners that a lot of people don't even know exist. And it's been my privilege to get to go and visit all of the diverse corners of this province and see how life is different in different parts of our province, but how people's needs are similar. They need health care. They need an affordable place to call home. They want a strong education system, and they want a government they can trust, that's going to be straight up and transparent and authentic about the challenges we're facing and the solutions we're choosing.
How confident are you that you can deliver on the 100 promises in your platform?
Well, we put an ambitious agenda forward, but I have an amazing team that gives me confidence, because I know that these people have the heart, have the drive and the work ethic, love New Brunswick, and will not quit until we deliver on what we've committed to.
And there are some really serious issues here in New Brunswick. Healthcare, cost of living. I mean, we're seeing them across the country, but some New Brunswickers are hurting. I mean, what do you say to them tonight?
Oh, I mean, I feel you. We see that hurt when people can't get the health care that they or their loved ones deserve, and they're waiting in hallways, in emergency rooms, waiting on a list for a family doctor for years in fear. And so I want to tell them that we hear you. Our number one priority is your health. We are going to work with everyone. We are going to work with the nurses, the unions, the doctors, the experts, the researchers. We're going to get everybody around a table and talk openly and find solutions together. And ththose solutions might look different in Miramichi than they do in Moncton, because our province is not a one-size-fits-all place. So we're going to deliver localized solutions that really respect and celebrate all the different parts of New Brunswick that we love.
Can you work with the Progressive Conservatives, considering the direction the party has taken of recent?
There's a lot of people in the Progressive Conservative Party that I call friends and that we can absolutely work with, because I've had the chance to know many of them. Many of them obviously left their positions, but they didn't leave the party. And I know they're looking forward to rebuilding that party back to its roots. We want to see a strong Progressive Conservative Party. We want to see strong parties in New Brunswick, because we want a strong and healthy democracy where New Brunswickers have choice, where they can vote for who they want and know they're going to get a responsible government that can work together. So I am prepared to work with Progressive Conservatives and Greens and others in the best interest of New Brunswickers.
Susan Holt, Premier-designate, thank you so much for this.
Thank you, Heidi.
All right, that was our interview, Heidi Pic, with Premier-designate Susan Holt, first woman to eventually lead the province. So that's a big win. And she talked a lot about her campaign. They fanned out across the province, working hard, 100 campaign promises. Like, they really wanted to stand out compared to what the PC campaign was doing. And I guess they did connect with the voters.
Yeah, I think the Liberals and the PCs used very different strategies because they had to, right? For Blaine Higgs, he's an incumbent. He was the least popular premier in the country and has been for a while. And so I think part of his strategy during this campaign was actually to try to take the attention away from himself. And so he put out a few campaign promises, not very many. Mm-hmm. He had days in the campaign where he wasn't out campaigning at all. He really tried to kind of keep a low profile. Whereas Susan Holt had to introduce herself to people, and she had to tell them what she was about, what is important to her, what they can't, I think she really had to be ambitious and really kind of be very communicative about what her priorities were, and she couldn't pare that down. She had to be very expressive about it, and so yes, clearly that worked out.
And what do you think some of the challenges are ahead for her?
I mean, I think at the end of the day, a lot of provincial premiers are still kind of stuck with the same circumstance, in that they're spending 50 cents of every dollar on healthcare. They're dealing with an affordability crisis. They're dealing with a housing crisis. They're all looking around to see what's going to happen when, if and when government changes hands at the federal level. And I think, we're going to see a few more premiers try to get these elections done if they can before the government changes hands at the federal level, because they're used to having Trudeau as a very helpful enemy or opponent, right? And now that we can see that maybe in not so long in the future that could change. And so I think it's going to be interesting to see who Holt puts in her cabinet, how many ministers she has, what are her portfolios going to be, what does that tell us about what her focus is going to be. It'll be interesting to see how she interacts with other first ministers, both at the provincial level and at the federal level, whoever they are. Now she is the second of two, she will be the second of two Liberal premiers in the country, so Fury won't be the only one in Newfoundland anymore. But it'll be interesting to see how she manages advocating for New Brunswick in this context where a lot of these issues are multi-jurisdictional and will need to work with other premiers and federal government, municipal governments in order to get things done.
Yeah, and you were mentioning how working with the federal government, we can't deny that it's a bit of an awkward relationship. Susan Holt's been running for the Liberals. They haven't been necessarily mentioning the Liberals a lot, trying to distance themselves from the federal government, because of course that's a bit of a tricky relationship. So that certainly seems like it's going to be a bit of a challenge, although Justin Trudeau did congratulate Susan Holt, of course, on social media. He did, and Mark Carney did. And so lots going on at the federal level for the Liberals as well. And so, but yeah, you're right. I mean, for the whole time, she was trying not to say Justin Trudeau's name, and so were her candidates, because they didn't want to carry the baggage of where the Liberal brand is federally. All right, thank you so much for that, Lori. Moving ahead, we're going to head over to our reporter Suzanne Lapointe, who's been at the Green headquarters tonight. She caught up with Leader David Coon earlier. Here's that conversation.
So I'm here with Green Party leader David Coon. How do you feel right now?
Well, I mean, I feel tremendous in the sense that the people of Fredericton-Lincoln, the new riding of Fredericton-Lincoln, have put their confidence in me to represent them in the legislature, and I'm grateful to them for that confidence, and I will do my very best to represent them effectively and well. We've, of course, lost Kevin Arsenault from our caucus, and that's a real blow. Kevin is a real leader in our province. He's one of my deputy leaders, played such a vital role in the legislature on behalf of all New Brunswickers, and we'll miss him significantly.
Okay, and I'm wondering, how do you see the role of the Greens in the legislature now that you don't hold the balance of power? There's a majority government, so there's very little you can do.
Well, as we have the kind of role we've played until now, where we have been the voice of reason in the legislature, where we've pushed legislation forward, some of it our own, some of it the government's brought that we've influenced, to be the opposition party that brings real solutions, put them on the table, hold the government accountable to get them implemented, and be the voice of reason for the people of this province in our legislative assembly.
How do you see rebuilding the Green Party going forward in the next elections?
Well, I mean, we continue to grow, and we'll continue to build. This is one election in many. One thing's for certain: there's always another election around the corner, and we'll be that much more prepared. We knocked on thousands upon thousands of doors across among our candidates. We listened to people, and we heard them, and that's going to be very helpful in us thinking about where we move in the future.
What will be the main priorities for you in legislature?
Well, certainly the number one priority is fixing the healthcare system. There's too many unavoidable deaths and there's too much unnecessary suffering going on because of a broken healthcare system. So the number one priority is to bring a sense of urgency and ensure this new government makes a generational investment in fixing our healthcare system soon, now.
How do you feel about a Liberal majority?
Well, I want to congratulate Susan Holt on making history as the first woman premier in the history of our province. I called her before I came over this evening to congratulate her directly, and I told her, she's got a lot of responsibility now. There's a lot of expectations riding on her shoulders to deliver, and we're ready to make sure that she does.
Sounds great. Anything you'd like to add?
I think we've covered it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
David Coon in pretty good spirits there, despite losing a seat. What do you think the future holds for him and the Green Party?
Right. I mean, 2 seats here, 2 seats in British Columbia, and such a difference, right? Like in British Columbia, it looks like they're going to be the kingmaker. In New Brunswick, they're just those 2 seats, right? Like it's hard. It's hard for the Greens at that point to have any real leverage on what's going on.
Yeah. All right, we're going to head over to break, and then when we get back, we will check in with our political correspondent in Ottawa, David Aken. Stay with us. Welcome back to Decision New Brunswick 2024. The Liberals picked up key ridings in southern New Brunswick, with nearly every St. John riding turning red. The only PC in the region to hold on to their seat was the Higgs Cabinet Minister Glenn Savoy in the St. John East riding. Now here with a closer look is Global News Chief Political Correspondent David Aken. David, what happened?
Yeah, the Liberals, their big chief objective for this campaign was they had to do something about St. John. They got shut out there in 2020. And as you mentioned, they just about swept the table in St. John. It's remarkable. And there's definitely a theme here. And I want to maybe run through some of the results we saw in the St. John area. And we'll start with St. John's Portland Simons. This is where John Dornan won. And of course, folks in New Brunswick knows the great controversy around John Dornan, the CEO of the Horizon Health Network, getting fired by Higgs. He's a doctor. He's been in the business for 30 years. And he says, to heck with it, I'm going to run in this riding, a riding that the Liberals have not won in 30 years. And who has held that riding for the PCs for much of that? Trevor Holder, a cabinet minister. And Trevor Holder was one of those ministers who said to Higgs, finally, I'm not doing it on Policy 713, your general leadership style. And so Trevor Holder quit. Trevor Holder had been the longest serving MLA. So this riding was open. Paul Dempsey was the PC candidate. John Dornan steps in. What a gift to Susan Holt. If he's not in cabinet, well, golly gee, I don't know what I'll think. Dornan be the health minister at least, maybe the finance minister. He's a pretty talented individual. As I say, Susan Holt's lucky that he signed up to run, and he wins St. John Portland Simons. Now, St. John Harbour, we have the same story here again. Another Higgs cabinet minister had just quit, had bailed it in. That was Arlene Dunn. She quit in February, didn't really give a reason, just said, I'm out. And so the Conservatives did not have an incumbent here. They ran Adam Smith, but too bad for him. It's David Hickey, the Liberal, who wins with 60% of the vote. That's a smackdown any way you look at it. St. John Harbour really is, though, the kind of riding the Liberals should win. If they're going to win in St. John, that would be your first look. That's downtown. And then finally, we take a look at St. John West Lancaster, and I hate to sound like a broken record, but that was another riding where a long-serving Conservative minister quit and on the way out said, I can't deal with Higgs. That was Dorothy Shepherd. She'd been the PC MLA there since 2010. And so we had wide open, and Kim Costain carried it for the PCs. Didn't work. Kate Elman-Wilcott wins St. John West Lancaster. She's the Arts and Culture Coordinator for the City of St. John. Now the challenge for Susan Holt and the Liberals, let's look ahead 4 years. You want to hold some of this St. John stuff. You're definitely going to have some cabinet ministers from St. John's and Susan Holt's cabinet, and you want to sort of build on this momentum. And that's why you heard Susan Holt tonight talk to Heidi Pic, could talk about governing with some friends of mine in the PC party, looking for those moderate PCs to try and consolidate the gains that the Liberals made tonight in and around Greater St. John's. Greater St. John, Iowa penny in the jar. There we go.
All right. Thank you so much for that, David. That's our David Aken in Ottawa for us tonight. And we'll take a break right now, but we'll be right back. Welcome back. Now, after her win earlier this evening, Liberal leader, the Premier-designate Susan Holt addressed a large and loud crowd. Take a listen.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you, New Brunswick. I want to thank every voter, every person who came out and exercised their right to vote and participate to keep our democracy strong. Thank you to everyone who voted, and a special thank you to everyone who voted for Team Holt and our amazing candidates that we elected tonight. I want to recognize every single candidate that put their name on a ballot and offered to serve New Brunswick. Thank you. I would also like to thank Mr. Blaine Higgs for his service to New Brunswick over these past 6 years. and offer my congratulations to David Coon on his re-election. I look forward to working with him in the legislature. There's two special thank yous that I'd like to make, if I may, to the people of Fredericton South Silverwood, the community where I grew up, where I learned to ski, to play piano, to do a whole bunch of things. Thank you very much for choosing me to be your MLA. I also want to take a moment to recognize a couple particular people who came before me. Brenda Robertson. Shirley Dysart, the first leader of the Liberal Party. Elizabeth Weir, the first woman to lead in the legislature. Aldea Landry. And all the women who came before me to make tonight possible. C'est une occasion extraordinairement spéciale pour moi, pour mes trois filles, Molly, Paige, puis Brooke, et leurs amis qui sont ici aussi. There's so many young girls that thank you, Aldea, and Shirley, and Elizabeth, and Barbara. I have to thank my incredible team of candidates. We had the most amazing group of candidates, and thank you for standing up with our team and for New Brunswickers. And congratulations to my team members that won tonight. This is the hardest one, but it's the biggest one. I have to thank John Holt. He has believed in me since we were 16 years old. And I would not be here if it wasn't for him. So I love you. Thank you. Let's go. Tonight's results make it clear New Brunswickers are ready for a change. We don't take it lightly that you have put your trust in myself and my team, and that you have hope for a brighter future. But that hope, I know, is short-lived, and it is going to be on us to deliver authentically, on the ground, openly and transparently. It's going to be on us to bring the change that you're asking for every day and everything we communicate with you. But I know we can do it with teamwork. I know we can do it with a focus on the people of New Brunswick. The people of New Brunswick that are our biggest asset. C'est vous autres qu'on fait ce travail. Couple commitments I want to make to you. We are going to lead with balance. We're going to watch the bottom line and deliver fiscal responsibility while we invest in the services that you need, like healthcare and education and an affordable place to call home. I love this province. I have loved this province since I was very little. And I got to wear a New Brunswick flag on a jacket when I was 12 years old and go out to Saskatchewan to sing the praises of this place, thanks to Philip Sexsmith and the amazing program that he put together. And then I got to put on a rugby jersey for New Brunswick when I was 17 and 18 years old, and I was so proud to wear our province's flag and compete in Canada with my colleagues. J'adore cette province, j'ai un gros amour pour cette province. Notre équipe, l'équipe Holt, adore cette province. Je veux vous assurer. I love you. I love you, New Brunswick. And with me, you're going to get a leadership that listens, and a leadership that cares, a leadership that will respect you n'importe quelle langue vous parlez, no matter who you love or how you identify, no matter where you live, no matter the color of your skin, n'importe quelle couleur de votre peau, où vous habitiez, la langue que vous parlez, qui vous aimez, avec un gouvernement libéral Holt, on va avoir un leadership qui vous aime et qui vous pouvez avoir confiance. With a government Holt, you're going to have a leadership that loves you and that you can put your trust in. I ask you to put your trust in me and my team. I thank you for putting your trust in my team and I. We are going to do the very best we can. We are going to work our butts off on day one. A new day and a brighter future is coming to New Brunswick tomorrow. Merci beaucoup!
All right, a passionate victory speech by Premier-designate Susan Holt. Now, Laurie, let's talk a little bit about the differences, I guess, compared to 4 years ago. Obviously, a very different situation. The last time New Brunswickers went to the polls, it was the pandemic. And Kevin Vickers, he was the head of the Liberals. So how do you see him as being different from Susan Holt?
Oh, for sure. I mean, it was a very different time for the party and a different time for everybody. As you say, the election was during COVID, and that was only 2 years after Higgs had won his first election, and even that was kind of a crazy one in that it was so close, and Gallant wasn't able to hold on, and so then Higgs ended up coming in afterwards, and there was this kind of back and forth about all of that, and so then during COVID, Higgs went for that majority that had been elusive to him at that point. But we still see, I think, through it all, a strong two-party system in New Brunswick. But of course, there are going to be kind of highs and lows for the two parties. And so we can see now the Liberals are moving into a government position, and then the PCs are moving into a kind of rebuild position, which is part of the pendulum swinging in politics.
Right, absolutely. And of course, you mentioned that Kevin Vickers, it was really hard for him to connect with voters at the time, but at the same time, Susan Holt, I mean, she's relatively new to politics. She was up against Blaine Higgs, incumbent, looking for his third term as premier, so she wasn't really set up for necessarily success.
Yeah, I think in Higgs' case, he comes to this as somebody who had a long career working for the Irvings, working with that organization. I can remember him being a kind of reluctant politician when he first started, and was almost like, I don't want to do this, but I'll do it for New Brunswick.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you so much for that, Laurie. We'll head to the break again, but we'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back to Decision New Brunswick 2024. And as we near the end of our special election show, we welcome back our political chief correspondent, David Aken, one last time. David, give us your final thoughts on the three major party campaigns throughout this election.
Well, I want to talk about two of them. Let's start with the incumbent Blaine Higgs. Ran a campaign that I thought was incredibly lethargic. Listen, it's a 32-day campaign. He was nowhere on 10 days of that campaign. No public events. The PC platform had two pages and one promise to cut the HST. It looked like Higgs was mailing it in. His campaign manager, Steve Outhouse, not only a lot of controversy in New Brunswick, but Outhouse won campaigns for Daniel Smith in Alberta, and he ran Leslyn Lewis's Conservative leadership campaign twice. Didn't win, but really did a good job on those. So I'm putting this one on Higgs. And on the other side of the fence, Katie Davey was the campaign manager for the Liberals for Susan Holt. A campaign's a tough thing. You've got to find money, you've got to find volunteers, find your supporters, and make sure they get out the vote. And take a look at the Liberal vote tonight, how they turned all these seats around. That is a well-organized, nearly pitch-perfect campaign. And Katie Davey, the campaign manager, I think deserves some of that. She's at the UNB, works at a think tank there. And I think there's going to be Liberals across the country going, I want to have Katie Davey on my team. So campaigns matter. The Higgs campaign, the PCs look lethargic, just mailing it in. And this time around, the Liberals really got it together. You guys were talking about the Kevin Vickers campaign. They looked a lot sharper tonight. And so looking again around the country, Liberals, anybody who's got a big L Liberal at any provincial or federal party, they're going to be thrilled with this. So they're going to go, maybe there's hope that the Liberal brand somewhere, you can still win as a Liberal somewhere in this country. Susan Holt looks like she's got the royal jelly tonight. Good luck to her as she forms a government and tries to form a cabinet.
All right, thank you so much for that, David. That's our David Aken reporting for us in Ottawa. Now, Lori, any final thoughts? New Brunswick has clearly made their voices heard loud and clear. What do you have to say to end the show?
Yep, I mean, that's another provincial election down, probably a few more up to bat sometime in the next 6 months or so. And I mean, we can see changes is possible when the voters decide they're going to show up and vote.
Well, thank you so much for all your insight throughout this evening and our special election coverage. And thank you so much for joining us. We'll have more on what the outcome means for New Brunswickers in the coming days and weeks ahead. Have a good evening, and we'll see you again tomorrow.